I'm Polly Warren and welcome to the Positive Perimenopause podcast. This is the place for some positive inspiration to help you through the rollercoaster ride of perimenopause. I truly believe that with the right support, knowledge and wellness tools, you can feel your best yet, because I'm learning this life phase can be a truly exciting and often pivotal time of life. With every episode, my mission is to support and empower you to own your menopause, because it's time to start taking care of the most important person, and yes, that's you. So thank you for being here and sharing your time with me. Now let's dive in. Hello and welcome back to the podcast. How are you doing? Oh my goodness, I'm so excited this week and feeling all the feels because this episode is my 1 year anniversary of putting out this podcast. I cannot believe it was a year ago today that I put out that first episode. I was so terrified. I was thinking, oh my goodness, is anyone going to listen? I don't really know what I'm doing, but I've done it and I'm just so grateful that you are listening, and I'm so grateful of all of your support. I honestly did not know if anyone was going to listen to this podcast. If I'm totally honest, I had very little confidence in my ability to be able to express myself clearly and coherently and eloquently. It was, I really struggled with getting my words out whilst I was in the depths of my perimenopause. So it was a bit like, what am I doing? But the amazing thing is I've really grown in confidence through this process, and it just goes to show that we can all do hard things, and unless you start, you'll just never ever know. So I really just couldn't be more grateful for all my incredible guests who I've had on. I mean, I think pretty much everyone I've asked has said yes, and I've learned so much from such incredible people who are such experts in their field. And I've just loved those conversations. And I just also wanted to say thank you so much to everyone who sent me so many wonderful messages. This is why I do it. This is why I really am committed to this podcast, because when I hear how it has helped so many of you through really difficult times, sending me such heartfelt messages, honestly, it really does mean so much. Oh my gosh, it's going to make me cry. Because that was the intention, but I didn't know if I was going to achieve it. I also just want to thank so many of you who have shared this podcast with your friends. I've lost count the amount of times people have messaged me and said, oh my gosh, thank you. And by the way, I've shared it with all my friends. And that obviously has really helped this podcast to grow. So thank you so much. So before we dive into this week's episode, I just want to remind you of last week's episode where I spoke to Dr. Louise Oliver all about effective and efficient breathing. I know breathing is something that we all do, but annoyingly, hormones also can affect how we breathe, and that can really affect our sleep and how we feel. So it's really worth knowing about this part of the perimenopause puzzle to just be aware that it might be affecting you. And if it is, the great news is there are things that you can do about it. So if you haven't had a listen, you can go back and listen to last week's episode. Now, on to this week's episode. This is a bit of a special episode, as it being the 1 year anniversary of the Positive Perimenopause podcast. And actually another thing was I never ever particularly liked the name of the Positive Perimenopause podcast because I just thought it was a bit of a mouthful. But at the time I couldn't think of anything better, and I just thought, I've just got to get it out there. I'll just do that. And actually I've kind of grown to really like that name, because it is about trying to make this time of life more, put a positive spin on it. And it's not talking here about toxic positivity where we've just got to put a smile on everything and not appreciate and understand that there are challenges which go with this time of life. But I kind of always love a reframe, and I know that there are lots of positive aspects and elements of this stage of life. So unless anyone can come up with a better name for me, then I think I'm going to stick with it for the time being. So anyway, this week, what I thought I would do was to dive back into some of the past episodes from the last year and pick out some of my most memorable bits or my favorite bits or the bits which you guys have told me you've really enjoyed. It was one of those things where I was like, oh my gosh, is this going to take me hours and hours and hours? Because I'm going to end up listening to every single episode. So I kind of landed on these bits very quickly. So I'm sorry that I didn't include everyone. Obviously, there were so many brilliant guests on this podcast and I couldn't include everyone, but I've included a number of them. And so I'm going to just introduce each one briefly and then just play you the clip. And I would love to know your thoughts on this. I'd love to know what to date has been your favourite episode. Please let me know. I would love to know if there's any guests or any future subjects you would love to also see on this podcast. So my first clip is from the wonderful Lou Featherstone, who is at Lou and Louland on Instagram. I had to include her first because she was such an instrumental part of this podcast being successful, because she's got quite a big Instagram following and she really helped me at the start to launch it. She put it on her Instagram. I can see that half of the listeners of this podcast are from the US, and I really do attribute a lot of that to Lou. So this is Lou and her tips, which she gave to us at the end, which I just think are so brilliant. And here we go.
I would say move every day, move physically, move yourself every day, clear your head, try and give yourself 5 minutes silence. I know that probably sounds, even if it's just before you go to sleep, or try and do some exercise daily, swim in the sea, walk around the block, force yourself to move every single day, even when you don't want to, particularly when you don't want to. And while you are doing that, just some days I write a list of all the good things that have happened. So even if it is stupid things like, I don't know, I like the workout, that's an easy one, but it could be I had a nice message from someone. I screenshot lots of my really nice messages and I put them all in a file. If I'm feeling miserable, I go, right, okay, all right, okay, I can do this. And that really helps. Just keep reminding yourself while you're doing your exercise or you're moving your body, just run through the people you love, run through the good things that have happened that day. Just make tiny changes, start to appreciate things. And then the next time you go for a walk, you'll start looking for the things that you appreciate, the bird in the tree or the sun in the sky, and just give that a minute and appreciate it. And just learn to go with the journey of it, even the bad bits. Try and, know that day will pass, or that bad patch will pass, and you will come out of it and it will get better, and just keep going.
My next clip is from Dr. Sian Evans, who I think gives us a really good analogy of what perimenopause is like.
Well, I think understanding that as we sort of come to the end of our reproductive life, our estrogen level starts to fall. And we have estrogen receptors all over our bodies. They're in our brains, they're in our hair, they're in our nails, they're absolutely everywhere in our body. That's why the symptom pattern is so wide. So that's starting position. And then also understanding that as we go into the perimenopause, it's not just a gradual decline in your estrogen. It's sort of like, I have a really good friend that describes this as a flickering light. And I think it's such a great analogy. Your estrogen sort of turning on and off and on and off. Now, if you sit in a room with a flickering light, it's incredibly distressing, isn't it? It's like you just want to shut your eyes. It's horrible. It can make you feel anxious. Certainly wouldn't help with your sleep, etc., etc. And then it's sort of flickering light that's turning on and off and then slowly fading away. Now, in menopause, the estrogen levels are very low, but it's not flickering in the same way. So in the same way eyes can accommodate to the dark a little bit, it's not great, but it's certainly better than that constant flickering. So actually perimenopause can be, I'm not saying always is, but can be more distressing than menopause for many women. Once women get through the menopause, they often feel a little bit better. So this falling off of estrogen level is really quite sort of disabling. And that also explains why some days you feel a little bit better and some days you feel absolutely terrible. And it also explains why a blood test is useless, not useful, because actually you might catch you on a good day and actually doesn't reflect the bigger picture, or on a good hour of a day. So it's about listening to your body and listening to those symptoms, really.
My next clip is from Karen Newby, who is a nutritional therapist. And actually, since we recorded this, she's now got her new book out, The Natural Menopause Solution, which is absolutely brilliant. In this clip, Karen tells us how we can use food and drinks to combat the negative effects of stress on our perimenopause symptoms.
If you have a low life load, you will go through, it will only benefit you in lots and lots of ways. For example, you'll sleep better as well. However, we can't do anything, I can't do anything about my patient's stress load or life load as a nutritionist, but I can help her adapt to it better. So that's from my perspective as a nutritionist, is to help her body adapt to high stress. And the easiest way you can do that is to, there's a couple of things. One is to look at your caffeine. So basically, every time you have coffee or tea, you are putting your body into stress mode. So, for some of us, we can metabolize coffee very easily and it doesn't affect us. For me, I'm a slow metabolizer of coffee and caffeine. I'm now decaf, and it's made such a difference to my mood and to my afternoon energy. Caffeine upregulates our liver massively. And, the liver is so important at perimenopause too. So watching your caffeine, or only having caffeine with your breakfast, to have it with food, like alcohol, if you have caffeine on an empty stomach, it has a greater effect. So that would be my first one. And then secondly is to balance your blood sugar. And the reason is because at this stage, we're becoming more insulin resistant, like I've said already. We're starting to get sudden weight gain. And a lot of that has to do with the way that we're handling blood sugar, we're handling sugar. So for me, it's about when we have a high of sugar, if we eat lots of sort of tea and toast, or, refined carbohydrates or caffeine, caffeine affects your blood sugar as well. We get a super high, we feel great. We're like, we've got loads of energy. And then the flames of energy go really tiny. And then we start to get that shaky, faint, clammy, I need to eat now, I'm hangry. And if you're depressed or if you're anxious, you exacerbate those feelings at that time. And then you're not going to reach for a bowl of broccoli. You're going to reach for more caffeine, more biscuits, more, dairy milk, whatever, to get the blood sugar back up. But the thing is with blood sugar is that every time our blood sugar goes low, the brain cannot deal with those loads of blood sugar. So it triggers cortisol and adrenaline. So even though you might be super stressed externally, you're increasing your stress hormones internally because of these blood sugar roller coasters. So this is giving those adrenals more work to do. But also every time you have these roller coasters, you're depleting the body of energy nutrients like vitamin C and B vitamins. And this is why we are incredibly fatigued at this time as well.
So, and that's often when you get the slumps in the afternoon as well, isn't it? When you really do lack that energy, and also why your sleep suffers so badly at night.
Absolutely. So protein is key with every meal and snack. Having eggs for breakfast, enjoying a big breakfast, being mindful of breakfast, but having breakfast is so important. Having, if you have porridge, then putting some cinnamon in, which helps with blood sugar handling, adding in those ground flax seeds, ground linseeds, which are a great source of protein. Having low sugar granola, those granolas out there that are so high in sugar, it's ridiculous. Or making your own granola, you can make up a massive load. But making sure that, instead of those sort of sweet biscuits and things, that you've got falafels in the fridge, or you've got hummus in the fridge, or you've got, miso soup sachets or edamame beans, or, some sodade yogurt that you can have with some blueberries, just stuff like that will anchor your hunger and give this nice drip feed of energy will help you feel so much more in control. So yeah, so caffeine, blood sugar, and then you can increase what's called adaptogens in your diet. So these are things like turmeric. Actually, turmeric has been researched to help with mood as well, to help with serotonin and mood, and things like supplements that you can get with ashwagandha, holy basil, Agnus castus is really good if you've got a lot of rage going on, a lot of anger. So these are all things, maca, ground maca, and maca is supposed to be good for libido as well, that you can add into your smoothies. So these are things that, and licorice, so these sort of blunt the cortisol response on the cell receptor site. So they're things that you can look at as well. But I have to say, blood sugar handling is something that is something that I work a lot with clients on, because it affects us massively, physiologically and psychologically.
Okay, on to my next clip, which was with Hilary Baggett. I've included this clip because it really stuck with me. This really demonstrates just how serious it can be if we ignore or we're not even aware of what is going on with us. Hilary in this clip is talking about how she very nearly, or she thought about ending her own life because that could have been, for her at the time, the easier option. It was just a really good reminder why it is so important to keep talking about this whole subject, keep raising awareness, but because we can all take action when we know what is going on and prevent situations like this from happening. So here we go.
I was having difficulties with my children, with my husband. I thought we were going to get a divorce. And one day we were on a hike and I was standing over this cliff and I thought, what if I just say goodbye and take a step? And wouldn't that just be easier? And I kind of snapped out of it to say, I know I need help because this is not who I am. Something's going on that's beyond me. And it was truly scary and terrifying. And I went to the first doctor and they said, oh, you just have some anxiety. Here, let's take this pill. And I said, this is more than anxiety. I felt anxiety before. This feels much bigger. So I went to a different doctor, and that's really the secret. When you don't get the answer from your first practitioner that's giving you the support, you need to find someone else. And so I went to this doctor, and we were on a virtual call, and she said, Hilary, look at me. I need your assurance that you're not going to harm yourself. I need you to get to this therapist that deals especially with women in midlife. And in fact, she's a woman in midlife. She's already gone through it. She is going to know what you're going through and be compassionate. Then I need you to get to a gynecologist, because you can't just go to a family practitioner through perimenopause. You need to go to somebody that really understands the complexity of what's going on with your hormones physically and all the symptoms I had, Polly. Wow. I had no idea how much was going on in there, and I just wasn't aware.
My next clip is with Kate Rohan, personal trainer and also founder of Owning My Menopause. And in this clip, we talk all about the importance of strength training at perimenopause and menopause.
Do you know what? It's a really good question, because I think, like I said, you'll have so many women who come into their perimenopause journey and they are fit and they are healthy and they haven't really changed their training, but they're not necessarily feeling any better. They've sort of reached a plateau. And that's what we really have to look at. Like, why do we have to change our training and what should we be doing? So what I would say to most women, I mean, first and foremost, if we look at looking at training no longer as an aesthetic benefit, because by default, we are working against the aging process. And with that, and with the decline in our hormones, that there are inevitable changes. Again, genes do play a part, and doesn't happen to every woman. But, most women I deal with or talk to, they've suddenly got weight gain. They don't understand how. And, this is where we've got to start thinking, okay, what do I need to do to be healthy for a long, mobile life? Not how do I look slim? So that's where I want women to focus on for their exercise. Like, it is about why you are doing it and you're doing it for. And if we start with our joints, so our joints and our bones, I mean, basically we're breaking down our bone density at a greater rate than we are building it up from around about the age of 35. And actually it's the same with lean muscle. We're losing around 3 to 5% a year from the age of 35. So, you know, that is a natural process by which we're working against, as I said. So if women aren't already lifting and strength training, which I don't think many are of this demographic, because again, it's something relatively new in the fitness world. I don't mean lifting is new. It has been around for a very long time, but certainly for the sort of 40 plus women at the moment, I never lifted in my 20s and my 30s, just wasn't something I did. So that is for your bones, essentially. Obviously, what we know is that decline in estrogen is breaking down our bones, which is then going to leave us more susceptible to things like osteopenia and osteoporosis. And again, if we just strip that back, like our lifestyle, our early lifestyle does play a part in that. Now, I have been weight training for probably only about 3 years since I've learned about the benefits of it. But I recently had a DEXA scan and I was diagnosed with osteopenia in both of my hips. Now, that will be possibly because of alcohol consumption when I was younger, smoking, disordered eating. And then there is that part where family genes play. But if someone like me now, having lifted for 3 years, is going to be diagnosed with osteopenia, which can lead to osteoporosis, it's actually quite worrying to think the millions of women out there that will go undiagnosed, and it won't be until they have a fall and fracture their hip, or they just do something and they get a fracture and they're like, wow, how did that happen? Why am I so fragile? And you know, it's not their fault. It's just that is the decline in estrogen. And again, that's where a lot of doctors would say HRT has a role and a benefit, because you could have someone who is very slim and very, they've got, you know, they look like they work out. They look, that's the wrong way, because slim doesn't equal working out. They look like they're in shape, and they may be under the assumption that because they aren't carrying any excess weight, that they've got really good bone health and really good everything. That might not be the case. So it's a sort of thing that I call like a silent symptom of the menopause, which is where weight training will have a massive benefit.
Now onto a clip from Jo Darling, who is an acupuncturist and founder of Menopoised. I absolutely love this clip where Jo talks about how our creativity is redirected as we go through menopause. Yeah, take a listen.
One of the lovely stories I like to tell about Chinese medicine is that so when we're creating blood, it's called tiangui in Chinese medicine, blood for periods. It's a combination of lots of different energetics, but basically we have this special meridian that runs between the heart and goes down to the uterus and sends energies to create blood in the uterus. And we also at the same time have energy coming up. I can never remember the different names of the bowel meridian, anyway, BAO, and it rises up from the kidneys to the uterus to meet the heart blood. So the heart and the kidney energy intermingle, and they sort of form this beautiful upright axis. But so they're creating this blood in our bellies for periods. When our periods stop, the kidney energy has got to go somewhere. So it starts rising up and it ends up in the heart. So the creativity it once gave to the uterus, it now gives to the heart and creates this beautiful wisdom, because the heart is the seat of all our emotions and our wisdom. So we still have the energy, it's just going in a different place.
A very quick break to ask you to hit the follow or subscribe button if you haven't already. And if you're enjoying this episode, I'd be super grateful if you could hit those stars and rate it too. Thank you. My next clip is from nutritionist Emma Bardwell. I've included this because it took me a while to pluck up the courage to talk about weight gain at menopause, because it is such a sensitive subject. But I think Emma tackled it in a really sort of no nonsense but sensitive way. So here we go.
We do need to think about it as in terms of body fat loss, rather than weight loss. And yeah, you're right. Scales can be really unhelpful because shifts in weight don't actually correlate to shifts in body fat loss. So what you're seeing on the scales is influenced by lots of things. So water retention, where you are in your cycle, how much you ate in your last meal, whether you've been to the toilet that day or not, how much salt you've consumed. So yeah, I think scales can be helpful in terms of raw data, but I wouldn't put too much kind of emphasis on them. And it depends. If you've had a history of, disordered eating, then definitely scales, I think, are probably not your friend. But there are lots of other metrics that you can use. So, just taking photos of yourself, just seeing how your clothes fit, how loose they are or how tight they are, measurements around your waist. There's lots of different ways. You don't have to use the scales. But for some people, particularly, I think the kind of person who can, what's the word, who can just look at it as raw data, who can kind of take out the emotion from those numbers. For those women, actually, scales can be, dare I say it, quite helpful. But, being in a larger body, it can really affect women's confidence. So it is definitely something that we want to look at. And there's lots of ways that you can look at it. Again, it's very complicated. There's lots of sort of approaches. And again, this is kind of contentious, but it's not really contentious, but it's unpopular. We do need to be in a negative energy balance. And I think for some people who are very invested in it, who find it very emotional, thinking about body fat simply as stored energy can help. So rather than thinking of it as fat, which has lots of kind of connotations, you just think of it as you're holding on to a little bit more energy than you need, and if this is your end goal, you're trying to kind of nudge it down in the right direction. And there's lots of ways you can do it. There's lots of numbers that we can kind of bandy around. But for most women, they're looking at reducing their daily calorie or energy intake by 300 to 500 calories, let's say. Some people find that tracking it, simply writing down what they're eating day in, day out, for 5 days can be really helpful. You can track it alternatively on an app like NutriCheck. And it can be really enlightening. Lots of women will suddenly, once it's written down, be able to see where they think this extra energy might be coming in. So it might be your portion sizes, for example. It might be liquid calories. Liquid calories often get ignored or forgotten. It might be the fact that you're snacking at night. It might be alcohol. It might be lots of different reasons, really. And then there's, the kind of solutions. And I'm kind of really oversimplifying this just because we don't have that much time. But it's trying to fill up on nutrient-dense meals. So this is, again, where I think there is lots of arguments, because it's like, calories in versus calories out, that's so kind of archaic, and we've moved on to that. Actually, we haven't. That is the law of thermodynamics. Nothing has changed. But it isn't just about those calories in. It's about working out what's in those calories too. So making sure that what you are consuming, even if it's slightly less than it was last week, because you're trying to lose this body fat, making sure that, there's lots of value in those foods. So my kind of big takeaways, I think, for women, and I'm talking about this non-stop on social media, people are probably so bored of it, is to eat more protein. Lots of us aren't getting enough in. We need to be eating at least 1 gram per kilogram of body weight a day. And I get women to do food diaries when I first start talking to them, working with them, and I'd say 80% of them aren't hitting enough. They aren't getting that target in. So it doesn't just have to be meat. It can be, there's lots of brilliant plant-based sources too. So protein really fills you up. It helps to prevent cravings. It helps to regulate blood sugar levels. It makes you feel content. It ticks a lot of boxes. It helps you build lean muscle. So that is probably my number one kind of hack. Hate that word, but that would be my number one hack. And then making sure that the rest of your meal is, fiber filled. So you can get a lot of volume into your stomach. And when your stomach is full, it releases these stretch receptors, which tell your brain that you are full and, content and satiated. You can get a lot of those in with fiber rich foods. So things like vegetables, things like whole grains, things like nuts and seeds. Those are the things that the two things that I would really kind of focus women's attention on.
My next clip is from my chat I had with Lucy Megason, who is the host of the podcast Spinsterhood Reimagined. And in this clip, Lucy is reminding us how important it is to take charge of how we feel, because we are in charge ultimately.
You asked, how have I ended up? How have I got to this point of sort of this place of acceptance? Well, the way that I've got here is by doing the inner work and by learning to love myself. Not like, oh God, I'm so great, but just having an acceptance in the way that we all should. Just accepting my good bits, accepting my bad bits, and just really genuinely cultivating that self-love. Because one of the main things I talk about on the podcast is that ultimately we are the ones that generate our own feeling. We have, it's not about finding happiness from anything external. It's all about going within. And I just, as I know you are too. So the reason I've got to where I am is because actually when I ended up leaving the whole detective thing, because I was signed off, I had a period of a few months to go back to that. I had a period for literally the first time in my entire adult life, I had the space to just breathe and to just be. And ironically, not even ironically, but weirdly, it coincided with the very, very, very beginning of COVID. So not only was I kind of confined to my flats, I also was not working, even remotely. So I had the time to really start walking down that path of personal growth, which has now come to be like literally the most important thing in my life. And it should really be the most important thing in all of our lives, because people don't realize how by working on yourself. And I know sometimes people are like, but what does that even mean? Like, what does that mean? But it means just realizing how much power you have over your life, and how powerful you are, and how powerful your mind is, and how ultimately life is all about everything starts with how you feel about yourself, and that just radiates out into every area of your life, including, by the way, how you feel about the menopause.
Now on to a clip from Heather Ashley, who is trained in the Wim Hof method and is also a health coach, and who I did my first iced cold plunge with. So I thought I just had to get her on the podcast. And cold water swimming is exploding, particularly in the part of the world where I live. And Heather here talks about some of the benefits of cold water swimming.
And I think it's the community. Well, I know it's a fact. Community is so key. And I see this, I've seen this personally over the last couple of years now, in particular with the Friday group that I run, Win the Morning, Win the Day. Because there's nothing like being together. We're meant to be together. We're herd animals, aren't we? We're used to being in these little communities instead of being isolated in our own little houses with, depending if you're not close to family or friends. And so therefore, when you are part of a community and doing, yourself, Polly, whenever you do something that you love doing and you're doing it with people, you get a rush off of seeing the enjoyment off of them, off of their faces as well as yourself. Yeah. So I'm sure it's a combination of that with the women going into the sea, because they've got that community, they feel great, and it helps with the cold flushes, and it helps reduce any anxiety that they have, and also with the inflammation. So anyone who's suffering, with inflammation or arthritis, etc., again, it helps there because it helps to naturally reduce the inflammation in their bodies.
Yeah, and also I think it probably really helps with resilience. It makes us all much more resilient to what is going on. I mean, we're pretty resilient as it is, but that definitely does help as well, I think, doesn't it?
Very true. And it's nothing like, you start your day like that and you're like, okay, I can do anything, I've just went and braved the sea in a freezing morning and that's me, you feel like you've had half a day and it's only, 9 o'clock in the morning.
My next clip is with Melanie Lawson, who is founder of Bear Biology. I absolutely love this brand. I get all my fish oil capsules from Bear Biology. I recommend them to everybody. And I think this clip's really important because it really opened my eyes into how important it is that we know where our supplements are coming from. And actually, a lot of the supplements on the market really are not, they're not giving us what we think they're giving us.
Like really bad, and I don't understand why it doesn't get any sort of coverage, is our soils really depleted in things like selenium, magnesium. So like you say, you could be eating what you think is a really healthy diet and still not getting the nutrients you need. So actually, we need to take supplements, but there's a lot of money in supplements. If there's some very big supplement companies, and Nestle owns a lot of supplement companies, like surprising how many they own. You don't realize, oh, that's owned by Nestle. And they just use cheap ingredients. Omega-3 is a great example of where this is one of the reasons I started my brand, actually. If you go and look at an omega-3 supplement, you'll often see high strength, 1,000 milligram. You think, oh, okay, that sounds good, 1,000 milligram. And it's only when you look at the small print in the ingredients bit that you'll see that only a couple of 100 milligrams of that is EPA and DHA. So you think, oh, I'm getting 1,000 milligrams of omega-3. You're not. You're getting a couple of 100 milligrams, which is nowhere near enough, like nowhere near. And a lot of those studies around heart health are based on 3,000 milligrams a day, not a couple of hundred. So there's lots of sort of, dodgy marketing, trying to make loads of money, positioning stuff as 1,000 milligram, but that's actually just the weight of the capsule. It's 1,000 milligram capsule. Right. It's not 1,000 milligrams of omega-3. So there's all sorts of, just like in everything, it's a bit like, you can buy a really lovely, I eat meat and I think, that's a whole other thing. Iron deficiency in women is a huge problem. And a lot of women become plant-based going to perimenopause. And actually then that's a whole other, host of problems around deficiencies. But eating a beautiful grass-fed steak from a lovely local farmer who's looked after their cows and hasn't pumped them with antibiotics, and you pay a bit more for that, but you're getting really good quality meat from an ethically grown animal versus £2 for some minced beef from Tesco. It's kind of the same. It's like, quality costs money, and to run a business ethically costs money, because things that are done properly cost money.
My next clip is from a chat I had with Jo Howarth from the Happiness Club, and it's all about the importance of feeling our feelings. I included this because I just want to highlight how important it is to feel our feelings, because I think so many of us, and me included, push them down, we suppress them, we don't allow them, we try and ignore them. But actually, when we feel our feelings, it really helps us to move through them and move on. So here we are.
For me, it absolutely starts with that allowing piece, with allowing yourself to feel however you're feeling, whenever you're feeling it. If you referenced children before, and I mean, I've learnt more from my two daughters than any teacher has ever taught me. And one of the things that I learnt from them massively was about being in this moment, this one right now, and allowing myself to feel however I'm feeling. You watch a toddler it's a masterclass in how to live your life, right? It's 1 second something isn't going their way and they have the world's most enormous tantrum, and 5 seconds later they're running around the garden with delight. That is absolutely, I mean, it's slightly extreme in a toddler, obviously, but that is absolutely the starting point for me, is to allow yourself to feel whatever you're feeling right now. And we don't want to, because some of the things we're feeling don't feel very nice. Our human instinct is to push against them, is to resist them, is to stop them, and go, no, I don't want to feel you. You can go away. Thanks very much. But in that resistance, what we're doing in that resistance is creating our own suffering. We're creating our own angst because we think we're stopping that emotion, but actually what we're doing is holding on to it and prolonging it and making it stop in our system, if that makes sense. And so for me, the absolute first step is to just allow it, to not beat yourself up for feeling anxious or stressed or down or depressed or worried or frustrated or angry or whatever difficult emotion you're feeling, to understand that that is just part of being a human being. It's okay to feel whatever you're feeling and allow that emotion to move through you so that it can move on, so that you're not holding on to it. And that almost sounds flippant coming out of my mouth. It's not necessarily an easy thing to do because we're so used to going, no, I'm not feeling you. I can't see you. La, la, la. I'm just going to distract myself with all this busyness over here and I'll focus on my children instead of focusing on myself. And because we don't want to feel those things. It's not an easy thing to allow yourself to turn towards it. One of the things I am is a mindfulness practitioner, and the key with mindfulness, one of the things that mindfulness taught me more than anything, is to start turning towards those emotions, to turn towards them and go through them, because the only way to get to the other side of something is to go through it.
Next clip is from Strong Coach Mary. I absolutely loved chatting with Mary, and here is some really good motivational talk from her.
All I can say is at 49 and a half, I have never felt better and stronger physically and mentally. So my go-to to get your physicality back, to get your strong back, is resistance training. I want you to just 3 times a week find a gym, grab my app, grab some weights, and just really commit to building a stronger body. That's one. Mentally, I have to say, and this goes across, I just want everyone to feel comfortable about something new. So embracing that fear, whatever it is, if it's a new job, if it's a new, I don't know, just anything that's outside your comfort zone. I know it's simple. It's a simple kind of concept, but it's hard to put yourself in a place of discomfort. But if you do it enough in all aspects of life, you'll only grow, you'll only build muscle, you'll only eat better, you'll only meet new, better people or great people. You'll only prioritize yourself differently and value yourself. So 1, get strong. It's coming from Strong Coach Mary, who throws around keys at 50. And 2, please don't be scared to put yourself in a place of discomfort. Do it.
Yeah.
Don't think twice, just do it, whatever it is you want to do.
Now, we know that phytoestrogens and eating phytoestrogens can be so helpful as we go through perimenopause, particularly if you're someone who doesn't want to take HRT, they can mimic HRT. And in my next clip, Marion Stewart, author of the book Manage Your Menopause Naturally, gives us lots of really useful information about this.
So the first study I ever read in 1990 on the natural menopause, was a study that was published in the British Medical Journal. And it was a study that was done in Australia at Monash University, where they took a group of women and they fed them soy, flax seeds, and red clover. And they found they were able to bring about a similar change in the lining of the vagina as they would have expected to see in women taking HRT. And so obviously that made me think. And then the following year, there was another published medical paper in the Lancet that was done in Japan. And I just thought, well, if they're bringing about these amazing changes in menopausal women, we can tweak our PMS program and turn it into a menopause program. So it was at that point we started helping women going through menopause. Obviously, then there was far less research than there is now. Now we know which foods are, not just which foods are rich in naturally occurring estrogen, but we also know how much they contain. And we also know that the receptor sites don't stay full for very long. And there's no point taking, let's say, a supplement that contains 80 milligrams of isoflavones at breakfast time and expecting that you're still going to have full receptor sites at dinner time. So the idea is to take these isoflavones, which under the microscope look so similar in terms of molecules to the estradiol, the estrogen that we had before menopause. So that's how come you can fool the brain. It's a really similar molecule. And by taking the receptor sites don't stay full for more than 4 to 6 hours. So you need to have something for breakfast. When you wake up in the morning, your receptor sites are empty. And so having, for example, some soy milk and some flax seeds with your breakfast will be good, because that will give you a fix in the morning, a phyto fix. Lunchtime, you can maybe add some edamame beans to your salad. And then you can have a soy yogurt with some more flax seeds later on in the day, either as a snack or a dessert. And that's really all you need to do. You can incorporate, eat tofu and do all the other things, but you don't have to. You can just keep it really dead simple. So it's not difficult to follow. And as long as you can tolerate those things, then it's plain sailing.
And is that something you'll need to do forever, or is that sort of a short-term solution?
No, you're going to need to do it forever, because if you think about it, once your ovaries are retired, you're never going to have circulating estrogen again. And one of the reasons why, apart from wanting to prevent heart disease and osteoporosis and dementia and keep yourself in good shape, your skin, your hair, your nails, and your vagina in good shape, you also want to make sure that you lock out the horrible environmental estrogens. So those xenoestrogens that come in pesticides, pollution, and waste, and our household products, will jump into the receptor sites if they're empty, and they can cause a massively increased risk of breast cancer. You want Mother Nature, in her wisdom, if there was a race between Mother Nature's estrogen, HRT, and the environmental estrogen, Mother Nature's estrogen jumps into the receptor site first and seals it off, and it stops the harmful estrogen from getting in there. And if you're taking HRT, it gets in there before the HRT, so eventually the HRT becomes redundant. And if you want to wean off it, you can without having awful side effects to withdrawal. Which happen, I would say to someone, if you're taking HRT, don't suddenly think, oh, I'll stop that and I'll get established on the natural approach. What I do with our patients is I get them established on the natural approach for a few months, and then in conjunction with their doctor, wean them off the HRT slowly so that they don't get withdrawal effects.
How we manage our brain chatter, our mindset as we transition through this perimenopause journey is just as important, I believe, as what we do to manage the physical side of things. And in this clip, Kundalini teacher Zoe Swan talks about how meditation and starting a meditation practice can really, really help.
I think my something has got to be where it all started for me, and it would be experimenting with some form of meditation. That's what I think. Whether it's challenging for you, if you're doing something that's challenging. I've had clients come to me and say they don't like meditating, they can't do it. Maybe that's because they've previously used rigid ways of doing it, or they think there's a set way of being or doing it. I just think, please know that there is something out there, and the benefits of doing that, not just for your mind and your soul, but also just for your hormone production and feeling balanced and creating that extra bit of space. For me, it's like a no-brainer. And you start to do that each day for a couple of minutes, and then just see how that feels in a week, 2 or 3. When I first started meditating, I remember not saying anything to anyone. I knew I had to find something that helped me feel good. And I think after 3 weeks, this was obviously when I was drinking, we went into 10 Green Bottles in Brighton, and I sat with my husband, and I remember him looking at me and him saying, "What are you doing? You just seem different. Like, what is happening?" I was beside myself with glee, obviously ego driven at that point. God, can you tell? And he was like, "Yeah, what are you doing?" And I was like, "Well, I'm just meditating twice a day, And it was like, wow. And so and you start to notice that you can become less reactive, that you maybe don't need to say, that you can observe. So I think that would be.
My next clip is from self-esteem and relationship coach Natalie Russell. I really enjoyed this conversation with Natalie. So did you. It was a really popular episode. And the words I'm going to share, I think, are just words we all need to hear. Natalie speaks so much sense. And so here we go. How do you define self-love? And why is it so important in this whole healing process?
For starters, I think, so self-love for me is me learning to give to myself that which I desperately sought of other people. I wanted to be affirmed. I wanted to have space held for me with my pain and emotion. I wanted to feel like I was worthy. I wanted to feel like I meant something. I wanted to be taken care of. I wanted to be nurtured. I wanted to have space where I could flourish and feel confident in myself. I wanted that. That's what I craved. So self-love has been about me giving that stuff to myself. Regardless of whether I ever get into another relationship, and I have dated. It's not that I haven't dated, but my standards have definitely massively improved. And with that, you become a lot more choosy about who you allow in your life. But even if someone did come into my life, I would never stop giving this stuff to myself. So part of self-love is also, for me, about doing that deep work, about doing the work of those deep core belief systems they run the show. So if you don't do the work on changing them and accepting why they're there and accepting those not perfect parts of you and having compassion and understanding for those parts of you that aren't that you don't want the rest of the world to see and reside, that you try and hide away because you feel shame about it. Actually learning to accept, embrace, understand them, own them. Owning my story has been a big part of loving myself and not allowing shame to be attached to any of that. I think once you own your own story and you work through and process the shame and come at yourself with love and compassion, which is what I would want from someone else, then no one else can ever hold that power of that story over you. So I think, yes, it's doing the daily things that are really important. Once you start going on a journey of healing yourself from the inside, then your habits and the relationships you have, like with food, with exercise, with the people you allow in your life, with money, with how you spend your time, with what you do with your life, all of that starts to roll on from that deep core relationship with yourself. So the biggest part of self-love is actually doing the painful, dark work of clearing that stuff, that internal stuff, and shifting it. And I can honestly say, I mean, there used to be deep levels of self-hatred. You can't abuse yourself in the way that I did. You can't attempt to take your own life and self-harm and cut your arms and do all of that stuff if there wasn't a deep level of self-hatred. And I can truly, truly say that I can stand in the mirror, look at myself and love all of me, warts and all.
Next, we hear from Annie Natke, who shared her story about surviving the tsunami in South Asia back in 2003. I really was so touched by her story. But in this clip, Annie is talking about how we can find more joy in our lives. So here we go.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, it's also about not getting caught up in the materialistic trap.
Yeah.
Right? Because in terms of the thing is, I coach a lot of senior executives, but who are very senior in their roles, they're C-suite executives and all that kind of thing. But it's amazing how many of them are not feeling happy, fulfilled, satisfied, etc. And the thing is you've got to be willing to let go of what you think you want in life, in the sense that, being able to have a Tesla car or, a Rolex watch or things like that, they're not important. Okay. They don't give you real joy. Okay, yes, they give you, you can flash it around and all that kind of thing. But some of the richest people are some of the most miserable in the world. Okay. So don't align with what you think, because society says that that's what it is at the moment. It's all about getting in touch with what really brings you joy and letting go of those materialistic things that you think you want, but actually they're not necessarily what you really want. I mean, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with having material things, by all means enjoy those things, but we have a very consumeristic culture where we just buy, and I'm sure that 90% of it is to fill a hole that we're feeling. Because I know that that's what I used to be like. I used to shop because I had a hole with me, so I'd buy shoes and handbags. This pre working as a coach and everything, that I would just buy. Now I hate having a handbag now. I'm like, oh, can I stuff everything into my pocket? Yeah, I'm just bored of carrying a handbag and stuff. So, so it's just find what really brings you real joy. These things, they don't bring us real joy. They're not really the things that bring fulfillment and satisfaction. And everybody's purpose is different. It's obvious what mine is. But other people's purpose may be to have a simple, easy life and to just provide for their families and have a little garden where they grow some vegetables. And that's fine. No one's saying we all have to be living this big, bold lives or anything. But if you're truly content and happy like that, all right, and not just pretending that you are because you're too scared to do something else, there's a difference.
And finally, here is Jan and Diana from Windrose Retreats, who I absolutely love and who gave me this fantastic reply to my final question, which I always ask on the podcast, about tips for a positive perimenopause.
Above all, prioritize yourself. Find time for yourself. And that is the hardest thing to do. It sounds very easy and simple to say. Doing it is quite difficult because we're busy. We're so busy. Our day is like boom, 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 boom. But just try and do that. Try and prioritize yourself and do something that makes you happy for however long it is.
Yeah.
And I would have to, again, quote Maya Angelou. She said this beautiful phrase, hope and fear cannot occupy the same space. Invite one of them to leave. And I would say, invite your fear to leave. Invite your fear to be gone, and just whatever you're afraid to meditate, you're afraid to do a yoga class, you're afraid to talk about menopause. Maybe you ask that fear to leave. Maybe you step into it and see how that feels. Do the opposite of what that fear means to you or feels to you. Invite it to leave.
So there we have it. I really hope you enjoyed these clips. I really enjoyed putting it together. Thank you again for all of your support over the last year, and I'm so excited for what the next year brings. Remember, if you can, it would mean so much if you could follow, subscribe, rate, review on whatever podcast platform you listen to this podcast, because honestly, it will really help me with this next year to take this podcast forward, to keep doing it. You know, I don't get paid doing this podcast. I do it because I love it. It would just be absolutely amazing if you could do that. If you want to get in touch, all my details are in the show notes. Thank you again for listening, and I will see you next time. Have a wonderful week. Bye.